Hi, I'm Demetria, and you're listening to Soul Podcasting. This is a podcast where I share weekly insights, advice, and support for new and veteran podcasters. I'm your Impact Podcast Coach, and I'm here to inspire and motivate you to launch and leverage your impactful podcast. You're listening to episode number 5. On this episode, we'll be talking about planning your podcast for a brand new year. This is my very last episode for the year 2022, and I'm super excited because it is my brand new podcast, and I'm only 5 episodes in, and I'm already really jazzed about what the upcoming year is going to bring as far as topics and perhaps even some exciting interviews. So I'm really looking forward to this. But first, I just wanted to build up this podcast with a couple of episodes where it's just me and you, and we get to know each other. And before I bring anyone on board, I just want you guys to know my heart, where I come from, and why I've established this brand new podcast. So if you've listened to my first couple of episodes, I've been talking about 5 reasons you should podcast. I've talked about my background in podcasting and what I love about it, how I got started. I've talked about helping you to find the purpose of your podcast, and really that's something you should do before you get started with one, right? So we've talked about establishing your purpose. And on this particular show, we're going to talk about planning your podcast for a brand new year. How do you plan it? So if you haven't launched already, this is a great episode to listen to, because we're going to get into some details about how you can go step by step in planning out your podcast before you even launch. Before we get started with that information, however, I just want to guide you over to pick up a copy of my Soul Podcasting Blueprint. This is the framework that I use when I'm coaching my clients. I help you to get from point A to point Z with your podcast, how to launch it, how to do everything in between, like finding the tools you need and creating the content you need. And this blueprint is basically going to show you all the nuts and bolts of what you need to get your podcast started. So I recommend you go ahead and download it. It's absolutely free to you. It's 29 pages. Within this framework, you're also going to receive a toolkit. So that's going to give you all the tools necessary for podcasting and give you some specific examples of what you could use. So go ahead and download that, because it's kind of the foundation of what I offer here. So I'd love for you to have your hands on that. And also, if you need just a little bit of clarity with your podcast concept before you get started, you may want to check out the Gaining Business Clarity Guide. And this is a guide that I use to help you to really figure out what you want to podcast about, to hone in on your ideas. So this is a free guide to you. Again, I like giving away free things because I think it helps you to at least get your juices running and get you started in the right direction. And then if you need additional help, of course, I'm here for you, and we could book a consult and a coaching session together. But I want to give you as many free resources and tools as possible to get you in the right direction. So that is the Gaining Business Clarity Guide. And you can also find that at impactpodcastcoach.com. So I have some tips for you in helping you to plan your podcast for the 2023 year and beyond. So if you're listening to this episode in another year, these tips apply no matter what year you're in. So go ahead and listen in on this. The first thing I want you to do is to know your business framework. So I've just talked about my Soul Podcasting Blueprint, which is my framework, right? So every business needs a framework. So if you are podcasting for business, make sure that you know your framework. What are your pillars? What are you trying to accomplish in your business? And how do you guide your customer or your client from point A to point Z? So what is your process? That will be the epitome of your framework. If you are going to be podcasting for hobby purposes, just because you love it and you have a topic that you just love to talk about and you just want to get on mic with your friend, for example, and maybe your goal is to entertain, maybe you're a comedian, whatever it is, maybe you are in ministry. Okay, so those will be a little different. Perhaps your framework would be a little different, or you won't approach it the same way as you would if you were running a podcast for business purposes. So really just capitalize on what you want to create your podcast about and what the purpose of your podcast is. And then you can determine what your framework is, or if you even have a framework. Maybe you're just there to entertain and you're just showing up and being consistent with new content every week because that's what you love to do. And you're gaining the traction and the audience that you want because you are finding people that love your content. So you might not necessarily need the kind of framework that I'm referring to right now, especially for business owners, but that's why it's important to know the purpose of your podcast. So the first thing then for you would be, if you're not in business and you're specifically creating a podcast for ministry, for example, then know what your ministry goals are. If it is an entertainment podcast, know what your entertainment goals are. What are you trying to accomplish for the next year? So once you know your framework or your goals, the second thing to do is to create content clusters. So you want to create enough content clusters that will help you to create actual pieces of content. So what I mean by those clusters, they're mainly pillars. So if you've heard the phrase content pillars, I'm referring to major topics surrounding your business or ministry or your hobby. What are the main topics that you want to be talking about next year? So those are going to be your pillars. So for me, my business consists of talking about podcasting. And I have some major pillars of podcasting that I refer to. And for me, those are podcast startup, podcast maintenance. And within the startup, I have pillars that are referring to overcoming the fears of podcasting, like self-sabotage and those types of things. And then I have topics that refer to the maintenance of your podcast. And so I have several pillars for podcasting, but I also run a podcast called Her Business Elevated. So with that particular topic, my pillars are confidence, identity, money breakthroughs, integrity, motivation, leadership, and growth. And from those pillars, I extract loads of subtopics, sort of clusters. And so that's what I mean by pillars and clusters and topics. So from those pillars or those clusters, we're going to create a goal for how many episodes you want to publish. First, you got to know, how much do you want to be podcasting? How often do you want to be behind the microphone and recording and editing if you don't have a VA or an editor? How often do you wish to be doing this kind of work? So really consider your lifestyle and what you're willing to do on a consistent basis. Is this going to be once every 2 weeks? Is it going to be once a week? Is it going to be twice or 3 times a week? It really depends on what you want to bring to the table. Then once you've mapped out that goal, you'll know how many episodes approximately you plan to publish within 6 months or a year. So you can even look at it in terms of the entire year for 2023, or if you're looking at this for another year, plug that number in, that year in, and see how many episodes you want. I have 2 podcasts that I publish on a weekly basis. And so those podcasts are going to be a total of 8 because I'm doing one for each of them. So that's 8 per month. And over the course of 12 months, we have 96 total episodes. And then I have 2 other podcasts that I only publish bi-weekly or every other week. So those podcasts together are a total of 4 episodes per month. And so I'm looking at a total of 48 for those. So I know how many episodes that I need to produce throughout the year, which means I need that many topics and that much content to talk about. So the next thing I do is map out my publication schedule so that I know what episodes are going to be published at what times of the week. Maybe I want one podcast that's going to go out on Wednesdays and another on Thursdays, another on Fridays. And also I'm looking at holidays. So what days are surrounding those publication dates so I can integrate content about the holidays on those particular episodes. Then I research ideas for each topic cluster that I came up with earlier on step number 2, when I talked about the clusters and the pillars. So that's when I start doing research. So you would go on Google and you would just research and see what types of ideas that you can find, things, questions that people are asking about those particular content clusters. Just so to give you an example, if one of my pillars is money breakthroughs, then underneath that pillar, I'm going to have content clusters called budgeting and finances. I might even have something called money in scripture, right? It depends on what I want, what I feel like bringing into this. There could be additional things like not just budgeting, but like maybe coupons, or maybe I want to add information about investments. So it depends on what I want to add to this. Whatever content cluster ideas that I come up with, I'm going to make sure that I write all that down underneath my pillar. I have another pillar called integrity. So underneath that pillar, I have transparency as one content cluster, honesty and authenticity. These are things that I've talked about already on my Her Business Elevated podcast. Why? Because I know that's part of my pillar, and these are content clusters that are part of that pillar. So I want to make sure I'm supporting all my pillars. I want to make sure that my content ties in with my goal. So once I have my clusters and my pillar, this is what I call it. I don't know what other people are phrasing these, but this is what I call my content clusters and pillars. Then I have my content pieces. This is when I go out on Google and I research what people are looking for. So I know that there may be people looking for how to stay authentic in business, how to authentically reach your audience in business, how can I be transparent with my clients, or how can I budget better for my business? What kinds of investments can I start with, or what kind of investments should I be making as a business owner or as a small business? Then I have a pillar called identity. So one of my content clusters is becoming who God wants you to be. So basically purpose. So I may look for information in Google to see what people are looking for there, or on Facebook, for example, Facebook groups, and see how people are asking questions about their purpose and their identity. And I will gather all these questions that I've seen people asking online, and I will create a running list of topics that support those clusters and those pillars. And then I'll have enough. If you're only running one podcast, it's so much easier, I think, and quicker. You'll come to your goal a lot quicker, where you can gather enough content to talk about for the entire year. So I recommend that you start with the quarter, but if you're already going to get enough content for that quarter, you may as well shoot for 6 months and even stretch that out to a year. It's really possible to find a lot of information about what people are looking for and to find topics that you can talk about for the whole year. So this is not something that you're going to, set in stone that you must talk about the X topic on X date. For example, you don't want to give yourself no wiggle room whatsoever, but this is just to give you a launching pad and some ideas as to how you can use the information that you've researched. You see what people are talking about, what they're asking, and then utilize that for your own podcast episodes and for your content. So once you've mapped out enough content ideas for even that quarter or 6 months or an entire year, then you want to start going ahead and recording your content in advance. If you don't have guests to interview, then it's very possible you can just take some time out of your day to hop on your microphone and record as many episodes as you possibly can within one sitting. So you want to batch record. I think it's most helpful if you already have your content ideas in front of you, you've outlined whatever you're going to say on each episode, and you just start recording. You can definitely batch record. And so this is going to give you a nice head start into making sure that you establish your podcast and maintain your goals throughout the year. And that is all I have for you on this episode. I just wanted to make sure that it's easy for you to plan out your podcast next year. I want to make it as easy as possible. So that's why this show is super important to me, because I want to be part of that journey with you. And I want to walk along this path with you and help you to discover just how valuable your voice really is and how much people need your message. And so if I can help you to get your message out there on a podcast and help your podcast to get discovered and help you to celebrate your podcast and the maintaining and the upkeep of your podcast, then I feel like I'm doing what I need to do for you. So I'm really happy to support you in that way. Once again, come and visit me at impactpodcastcoach.com for your free 20-minute consult. And we can talk about how I may be of help to you and work together if that is something that you are looking to do. Be looking for new courses in the future. I will have a lot of content and a lot of beautiful resources available for you in 2023. So I'm super excited about the launch of all of this. And whatever you celebrate, whether it's Kwanzaa, then happy Kwanzaa. If it is Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I will talk to you guys at the beginning of 2023. So peace out to 2022. And I can't wait to talk with you again. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. Stay safe, be blessed. And until next time, happy podcasting.